on that 2 past point. So Shuang, did you want to kick us off?
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our How to Write an Academic Paper panel discussion today, proudly brought to you by UNSW Post Council and ARC. I'm your host, Shuang, and I'm a research committee member of the Postgraduate Council. The Postgraduate Council is a student body that represents, supports, and advocates for all postgraduate students in UNSW. If you have any questions or concerns, please do reach out to us. Before we start our event today, I would like to show my respects and acknowledge the Bidego people who are the traditional custodians of the land, of elder past and present on which this meeting takes place. So for our academic paper writing panel discussion, we have 2 panels today. Our first panel is Mr. Will Scates Frances. Will is an experienced educational designer, facilitator, lecturer, and convener with over 10 years in the university sector. His capabilities as an educator have been recognized by awards for small group teaching, and his essay writing guide, Minimanual of Essay Writer, is used by over 80 universities around the world. Now, Will is an academic learning facilitator in UNSW. Hi, Will. Would you like to say hello to your audience today?
Hi, everybody. Should I say anything else or just?
It's okay. Yeah. Thanks, Will. So our next speaker is Dr. Kefeng Zhang. Kefeng is a senior research associate, ARC DACRA fellow in the School of Civil and Environment Engineering's Water Research Center. Kefeng has been working in the area of urban water management using nature-based green technologies like bioretention systems, wetlands, and green walls. He tries to understand the pollution and risks associated with different water types, in particular stormwater, but also include gray water and wastewater, and then use green technologies for pollutant removal and risk mitigation. Kefeng has been an active reviewer for top journals in the field, like Water Research, which ranked #1 in water resource category. And he has been previously awarded as the outstanding contribution in reviewing. Hi, Kefeng, would you like to say hello to us?
Hey, hello everyone. It's nice to see everyone.
Okay, thanks, Kefeng. And joining me as a co-host there will be Joshua Karras. He will lead the discussion on how to write an academic paper with Will and Kefeng. And now I also want to give a very quick notice that our event is going to be recorded. If you're uncomfortable with your camera on, please feel free to turn it off. And I also request you to please keep yourself mute while our panel discussion is going on, so they are more audible towards you and you have any questions during the discussion. Please feel free to put your questions down on the chat box. I will take note on the questions and they will be taken up if time is permit. Okay, now I would like to hand over to Josh to start our panel discussion on how to write an academic paper today. Hi, Josh.
Thank you so much, Shuang, for that awesome orientation for us all as we get underway in what was described as a speedy event. We're going to race through a bunch of questions, and we're very grateful to both of you, our wonderful speakers, Kefeng and Will, for joining us once again. As Shuang mentioned, please, we want to hear your questions. Will be prioritized over the ones that we have set already, because after all, you are our attendees. We're here for you. And if you have questions, please feel free to ask them, and I'll absolutely endeavor to have them inserted into our conversation, our guided conversation. So enough talking from me, let's get right into it. We'll start by just a nice orientation question to you both. I'll just call, we'll go back and forth, but as we undergo the conversation, please feel free to speak up, both Will and Kefeng. Starting with you, Will, love to know a little bit more about yourself and specifically what has brought you to be at this point in your career? Oh, sorry, you're muted there, Will. There we go.
That was always going to happen. So I'm a historian by training. I did undergraduate and honours at UNSW, and then I took up a PhD candidature at the ANU. And in order to do that, I had to teach, both as a way of funding my studies, but increasingly as something that I really began to love. And I ended up teaching in a huge range of disciplines at a whole bunch of different universities, which in turn led me into the path of first an educational fellowship at the ANU, and then into my current role at UNSW, which is as an academic learning facilitator. So I work with students to improve their writing, to improve their all range of learning skills. And yeah, so that's kind of where I ended up, how I ended up where I am now.
Absolutely. It seemed like a very organic pathway. Thank you for that. And Kevin.
Hey, hello everyone. So my name is Kefeng. So I did my undergraduate and also master's by research in China, where I started kind of some research experience and also started writing up papers, not in English, but that was the first writing experience, which ended up in journals. But later then I came to Australia in 2011 as a PhD student, and did my PhD on stormwater management. So there's a few also publications with PhD. So in particular, the two most memorable ones, I just want to mention the first paper was absolutely disaster at the beginning. So I just want to say that if you get lots of comments or even negative comments, that's absolutely normal at the beginning. And I had hundreds of comments, so so don't feel discouraged. And also there's another paper that's got rejected 5-6 times by different journals, so that's also part of the publishing life. So you always have to face rejections. So that's my PhD, and then after my PhD, I worked as a research associate, research fellow at Monash, and then in 2017, I moved to UNSW as a research-only position until now. So I work a lot with students, masters by thesis or PhD students. So I'm really interested in doing research, and especially on my topics around the water treatment and nature-based solutions. So yeah, so that's where my passions on. So yeah.
Thank you so much. The 2 points I take from that are absolute respect towards your capacity to have transitioned from one language to another in the research sphere. That is a whole different world that I can only imagine, only particular students are faced with. So to all those international students who are joining us today, who do not have English as a first language, there's hope, I suppose,
So, I mean, I just want to add, so there's always a joke said by my supervisor, because in the first meeting, I wasn't able to communicate with her.
Wow.
In terms of speaking language, so that was also one of the difficulties. So it's fine, you learn, and as a PhD student, everything you're learning from scratch, basically. Yeah.
That's absolutely inspiring. Really, I'm deeply moved by that, and I hope that you serve as I'm sure you do serve as an inspiration to all students who have English as a second language. The second point I would take from that is, and I need this personally, is that the difficulties you have in just starting out in the research world, and how those struggles you had in your first paper. But I need to hear that right now, because I just got back my first draft of my lit review. I have been to the Red Sea, and there was less red there than there is on my paper right now. So definitely needing to hear that at this point. Thank you. So getting right into some more specific questions in relation to the topic of today about further understanding on academic writing. Will, the question for you is, where do you think is a good place for students to begin when they want to publish an academic paper after isolating the gap in their research topic? In other words, what are the essential ingredients to getting started on the road to academic writing?
I think that there's a few. It really depends on how they've identified the gap in their research topic, because that can come from a range of different positions, right? It can be the product of them attending a conference and then having a conversation that sparks, it points towards further avenues that will then lead to research, right? But if that's not the case, if they've discovered something through the process of research, then the best place, I would say, at least initially kind of getting started, is existing work. So be that masters, honors, things that they can go off as a starting point that they've already received feedback on. If that's not the case, then I would say the best starting point is to start writing. And to start having those conversations with peers, to think about where that research is going, to kind of have that social padding, I guess, because writing is really a social activity in a lot of ways, and benefits from conversations, from writing groups and so on in a lot of cases. And so thinking through the process, planning out that process is something that's really important. And, it was I guess why Kifeng, the not being able to speak to your supervisor stood out as something that's kind of a really, really big hurdle to make, because oftentimes talking to your supervisor is a really, really good place to start when it comes to picking an avenue for initial publications. And so my first publication was from my honours thesis, and it required a fair amount of work to do. I don't know if going back I would have done the same thing, but it was still, having that initial writing already done was really, really helpful, because you can edit writing. You often find that when you go back, you hate what you've done, but that's a huge point for improvement. Does that kind of answer the question in terms of thinking about where to start?
Absolutely. Now, the concept of for me, the primary takeaway is just start writing. Put pen to paper. Put text on the screen. I think I'm thinking back to that one experience where I was just writing and I didn't really know it was mostly jargon, but out of that I extracted, but maybe that's an interesting, intriguing point of potential novelty. So that's, for me, the primary takeaway of your answer.
And I would say that, like, writing is thinking. Writing is a way of producing kind of malleable thought. You're taking stuff out of your head and putting it on the page and then interacting with it, and going in with the expectation that you'll have everything already in hand is usually a bad expectation to have of yourself, because I know some people who write like that, but they're the exception, they're not the norm. And what they've done is they've successfully kind of internalized all that process of writing. Their writing process is kind of sitting down thinking they don't necessarily need the page. But generally, the reason that writing is so useful is because it is a way of externalizing, even just temporarily, parts of your thinking and kind of having them arrayed in front of you. And thinking about it in terms of that, if you ever get stuck, like saying, okay, well, like, obviously I don't know what I'm talking about yet. I just have questions. Now I'm setting out to answer them. The actual cohering of all of that will probably only come at the end. Most people don't know what they're talking about in the process of writing an article until the very end. Now, this varies by discipline, but that's at least been my experience.
Sure. I'm hearing, don't bring baggage. That makes sense. Thank you for that response. That makes total sense. Kefeng, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, so I guess my experience is more from engineering discipline, like how we write some engineering-based papers. So for me, my opinion is that writing doesn't really start when you finish your work and you have all the data ready and you want to write. Actually, writing starts when you are planning doing the work. So when we're planning, you are thinking about how I'm going to communicate the results, the future results, to the audience, to different people. So actually writing begins from that in terms of thinking. But this doesn't really mean that things won't change. So maybe after you finish your experiments, finish your work, the original idea of writing will be completely different. So that's the first point I want to say. And in terms of actual writing process, so this is what we're doing within our group. Is the first step, we ask the students, so after they finish the experiment, we ask the student to come up with a structure. And this structure will go around many rounds. So the first round, the key thing is actually at the end of introduction, what is the key aim of this study, and what are the specific objectives of your studies is going to achieve. So this is the key, basically the key message of the paper, and the whole paper is serving for those key messages. So when you're writing up anything, results, methodology, introduction, you have to respond to these aims and to these objectives. So that's the start of writing, and then we will start. So when you have the structure, first structure, you have the methods and the results and discussions. So in each section, you will put down the key points or dot points in the form of dot points. So write down what you want to have for each paragraph. So what's the key things you want to cover in each paragraph? And that's actually the second step. So this step we always discuss with supervisors. So don't just go and write the whole paper and give the supervisor. That's actually the worst practice because the whole thing may change. And then when you have the dot points, the last step is to adding the key figures, key tables into your paper. And then again, think about discuss with supervisors and discuss what's the key messages from each paper, each table. So that's pretty much what we are following. And as long as you're following that, I think the logic of the paper will be very clear, and at least it's how people will perceive the paper from the key message, and from the key message they will imagine, well, okay, you want to achieve this, and what are you going to do? What did you do? And they go into the methods, and after they look at the methods, okay, I'm expecting the results for each method that you described. So then step by step, it's getting more clear and easier communication to the readers. Yeah.
That is some very clear and practical advice there. I like that, just the concept of relating each element of your work back to a critical aim. Absolutely. Thank you for unpacking that for us. I mean, of course, as we go through our work, we're going to hit some trouble points, some roadblocks. What are some ways? What are some troubles? I should ask. What are potential trouble points or roadblocks that students should know about when undergoing academic research? Will?
I think that there's, when it comes to writing itself, like there's a whole bunch of things that if you have too much of, or if you have too little of, it can be a roadblock. So one example would be ambition, right? If you have too much ambition, if you overstate your claims, if you set too high goals for your research, for your work, then that can be a real roadblock, because it both holds you to a standard that becomes difficult to achieve for yourself, but also sometimes you can end up kind of putting too much on, like kind of separating yourself from your disciplinary peers, right? Where you're in a position where you kind of are acting as though you didn't come from the discipline you're in, and you didn't learn anything from them, and you've kind of invented the new thing, right? So which might be the case sometimes, you never know that those people do sort of exist, but it can cause problems for actually, getting published. So balancing that, but also not having enough ambition, just kind of repeating what other students say, what other scholars are saying, and kind of trying to publish something that's really not really offering something. You always need to be offering something and asking questions and moving things along, right? I would say that's one trouble point. Another one is critique, right? So your response to critique is really important. Taking critique on board, like taking feedback on board, is really, really important. But at the same time, taking it too harshly can be really negative. If you take a kind of negative critique or the infamous reviewer 2, if you take their comments on your work really, really personally, as we've already mentioned, the kind of ability to take rejection. If you do take that too harshly, it can become a real barrier to both improvement and to your confidence in publishing and putting yourself out there, because a lot of it is really putting out work that you're still going to be questioning, depending on your character. But also knowing what to take on board as well. So I think that one way to get around that is really, situating yourself within a group of peers if you can, if that's something you have access to, if that's something that you incline towards. And so, one piece of trouble that I often encounter with students is that they don't edit their work enough, right? And that becomes a real roadblock for people. And the reason that that's an issue is because if we think about, that process of thinking as being taking the thought out of your head and putting it on the page, and then interacting with it, and that being a process that's kind of producing things, a lot of that thinking is still in your head, right? And it was still useful writing the entire time, because you're producing work, you're producing words. But then when someone else goes to read your work, they're not going to know everything that's in your head. Your writing is just a kind of tip of the iceberg of a whole bunch of other things. And so if your approach to editing is kind of lackluster, or you view it as purely proofreading as opposed to ordering and presenting for clarity, and really removing the working from your work. So removing the thinking, and just presenting the kind of final product, the thought. If you don't learn good editing practices, I think it can be a real barrier. And the best way to learn good editing practices is really to edit other people's work as well as your own. So I think that's a real barrier. Just getting terrified by blank pages, putting too much on yourself, and not really taking into account the fact that people know that this is the start of your career if you're a PhD student. And oftentimes, like, you're the lifeblood of the discipline. If you don't go off and finish your PhD, if you don't go off and publish, and you don't do these things, then all of the people who you're handing over work to, their disciplines kind of come to an end. So they're invested in you as much as you are in them. And so that, I think, can be a barrier where you think that you're just always a supplicant. You're offering something always. So those are some things I would say.
I am feeling personally, simultaneously attacked and comforted by that. I think I've had every single roadblock happen to me in the last 6 months. But then again, I'm glad to know that apparently all of what you just outlined is a common experience, from the ambition to the fear of the blank pages to all of this concept and everything in between. Good to know that it is normal and that they can be overcome. Thank you, Kefeng.
Yeah, so I absolutely agree with Bill. So it's the communication, and we want to write things from the aspect. I mean, from the reader's point. So make sure that you're writing for other people, not just for yourself. And when you write that, think about, always have that in your mind. And some other things I want to add is more like from technical side. So I just want to give some examples of that our students have met. So for example, when I review papers or students' papers, there are lots of repetitions in the paper. So they always repeat themselves in the methods, in the results, sometimes even in introduction. So so remember that every section has its unique purpose. Like introduction, you don't put methods in the introduction, and when you introduce methods, so lots of students, almost maybe 80% I would say of my students, they put methods in the results again, so they want to see the methods in the results section again. So this is what I did, and this is what the results, and this is not unnecessary repetition, because if your methodology section has introduced all the methods properly, you won't need to see methods again to make people clear what you want what you did. So and also sometimes students tend to keep repeating the aims of the study because they want to always. I mean, that's I guess that's normal, because you always want to see, this is what I want to do, and this is what I did, and this is what I got. But they are in their dedicated sections, so make sure that they are not repeated all the time. And the other trouble point will be sometimes when we have the discussion or in the methodology description, so you always have a loss of focus. So when you describe something, you tend to go into another things and come back to the same thing. So that's something that you can avoid. So when you describe something that's important, finish with that. So you don't try to go around and discuss the same thing in different paragraphs or even different sections. So that's also important that you make the paper precise and clear. That's another point. And the next point is more about vagueness. So sometimes we tend to describe things very vaguely. So for example, in my area, so this reduction is bigger than this reactor is bigger than another reactor, or this system is bigger than other system. That's very vague. It's not scientific writing. So when you say it's bigger, so just say how much bigger, make it very specific. And that's a scientific writing. So if you say good removal or bad removal, or what do you mean by good and bad? So these kind of things, you need to quantify things, make it more specific. And I see lots of students want to use the word significant, especially when you compare things, but be careful. This is a more statistical term. So when you see this is significantly different than the other things, you have to do statistical analysis. So be careful by selecting some of the words. And to be honest, even for now, I make these mistakes. So it's not big, but you can fix it early on. And another thing is about figures and tables. So if you look at the journal papers in Nature and Science, their tables and figures are very beautiful and they're very well done. And the key point is you make your figures and tables good, but also clean and precise. And one more criteria I always say is the tables and figures should explain themselves without anyone reading into the text. So because they capture the eye, and when you read the papers and when you search the papers, the tables and figures, they come out very, very clearly. And if you capture the eye of others, your paper will get more readers. So that's very important. And the last point actually was about keywords. So I just want to give some tips about keywords. So I don't know how students are selecting the keywords, but keywords are actually, again, you think from the point of reader. So for example, I want to search or find a paper, and they usually search from abstract, from the title, and from the keywords. So that's the three fields they search. And so the keywords actually will help you to reach people. So don't try to repeat the same words that appears in the title, appears in the abstract. So always use different alternative terms that you use in the title, the abstract, otherwise it's useless. And you can use abbreviations or some other common names that's known. So that's the purpose of keywords. So use variations, variant terms or phrases that are likely to reach the readers. So make sure that the paper is observable or searchable, and publishing a paper is not end of the, it's probably kind of end of your writing process, but it's just the beginning of the paper, because people want to find your work and you want the paper to have more bigger impact. So it's important that you kind of think about these things and try to increase the impact of the work. Yeah.
Kevin, you've dropped some absolute gems, and I saw Will nodding along madly to that. Of the many useful things you mentioned, I want to just comment that regarding graphs and diagrams and whatnot, graphics. The glass has shattered, and I've had a huge realization that I am much more inclined to cite a paper as I'm conducting my endless skimming for my lit review research. I will stop on the papers where I can just get the snapshot through a graphic that explains all. So that's huge, and that's a huge takeaway for me personally. A follow-up question, I'm going off book slightly, in regards to your comments on vagueness. We are, as you mentioned about, acknowledging things are things are good or bad, and acknowledging by how much, or and providing some surrounding detail. As PhD candidates, we are at the periphery of knowledge. Sometimes the data is just not there to tell us how much better or worse. We're getting more and more desolate as we for data as we get into those right to the point of our I suppose our novelty. So, do you have any recommendations for how to provide that richness of data to avoid vagueness whilst in that space where there are so few other papers to rely on?
That's a good question. So I think, that was one example that you use figures and numbers to support your claim, but also by as much as evidence as you can get. If there's limited literature before, that's fine. You just see that. Just to be clear, and don't try to basically it's make it accurate enough. That's fine. So it doesn't mean that you always have to use numbers, and sometimes it's very hard to do that. But try always keep that in mind, and you want to make a statement that is supported by your work.
That makes sense. Thank you. Will, do you want to add anything to that question? Or has Kefeng?
Yeah, a lot of the really kind of almost technical advice was stuff that I would have said. So, but I would say generally, outside of STEM fields, the principle of specificity over kind of stating significance is, I think, a really, really important one. In that, one thing that a lot of writers do is that they overuse adjectives, right? And the reason that I think that they do this is because in their heads, they attach, descriptors to whatever it is. They attach descriptors to a range of different phrases. So they'll say, this is extremely important, and that will transfer across into their writing. But oftentimes what it does is those adjectives end up, rather than lending credence or lending emphasis to statements, they end up weakening them. So, saying that this is extremely this, or this is significant, or whatever. Being specific is usually far better. And so I think that's advice that transfers across from STEM into other fields, because it's fine to write those adjectives while you're writing, but then going through and looking at every single adjective and saying, does this add specificity or not? Is it just there for emphasis? And if it's just there for emphasis, then it probably doesn't belong there. There are other ways to do that process of adding emphasis, which are around argument, because ultimately, you don't want to be stating significance. You want to be showing it. You want to be making that a product of your argument, a product of your actual data and your presentation and whatever. So I think that's really great advice. It's not just for STEM.
Thanks, Will, and thank you for that clarification. While we've got you, while we're on speaking in relation to that topic, if we're having trouble, this is this type of writing may be new to many of us, especially for those in their first year of writing. I've never written a lit review before. What are the available resources at UNSW to assist students who are undergoing this type of academic writing? There's in a sense, there's the UNSW specific resources, and then there's general resources. So I guess I'll start with the UNSW resources. Oftentimes schools have specific advice. They have guidelines and so on that are sometimes distributed to PhD students that are always really good to check out. And sometimes they have, for example, I know the business school, they have their own academic skills unit that do a lot of work around creating resources, talking with students and so on. Then you have the academic skills unit, which is in the PVC ESE portfolio. That's me and a whole bunch of other people like me. We do individual consults and we make resources for students to use. And I would encourage you to take advantage of those. We're here to kind of have to speak with you about whatever it is about your work that you want to discuss. Like we're a sounding board. We can talk to you about whatever. We can't copy edit your work, but we can give you feedback. I would say generally that looking for events like this one is a good idea. Building your kind of network at UNSW, if possible, think about finding
like, you know, if you join your disciplinary society, you're part of that, you're involved in that, seminar programs within your schools. All of these are not just kind of for fun, and they're not just to find information. They're really a resource that you can use to improve your writing, because writing groups, for example, are really, really brilliant spaces for having conversations about disciplinary norms, because a lot of one difficulty with giving advice is that something, you know, a lot of things are really, really specific. So it's about it's more about interrogating your process than it is about, you know, this will work for you. But also they're disciplinary specific. So certain things are going to vary. You know, what looks good in one discipline might look terrible in another. So you've got that. And then, you know, I would say that another probably underappreciated resource and a weird one is marking, both as an undergraduate and as a postgraduate. You have the opportunity to get paid to give feedback on people's work. And there's a whole bunch of research that says that the process of giving feedback is usually often more beneficial to improving your writing than the act of receiving feedback. So you benefit more from receiving feedback, from giving feedback than you do receiving it. And so, you know, taking advantage of that and using marking as a space to improve your writing, to think about, you know, you're looking at something and saying, okay, well, I would improve this way, is you're going to take that lesson probably and bring it back to your own writing. So those are kind of a range of things that will exist around UNSW. There's also a program called Smart Thinking that's kind of more about like specifics of expression that you can use. I think that you can send it off, but there's a whole bunch of resources that university have that are free and easily accessible and definitely worth your time. I would say that, you know, having someone to talk to about your work is going to be, you know, it's going to be more useful sometimes than just banging away at, you know, if you get stuck, like take a time out and book an appointment with somebody and talk to them, or go to an event or whatever it is. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. There's an opportunity for you to give a shameless plug in relation to a question from Mosson, who's asked, do you know any useful books regarding academic writing? Over to you, Will.
So I'll start by recommending the UNSW Academic Skills website, which is currently in a rework. So in the process of a rework, so we're going to prioritize different things in it. But there's a huge volume of resources there. I would say you can also, if you want to, you can use a writing guide that I wrote for that was aimed for undergraduate students, but I found that people from a range of different writing backgrounds find it useful. There's a few writing resources that I would refer to that are longer than that. My Minimanual is free and it's online. I'll send the link in the chat. But there's one written by the Thesis Whisperer at ANU that's pretty good. Also, I think it's written in partnership with Sean Lehman, who's at Academic Skills as well. So that's a really good writing guide. I would say, yeah, that those, you're going to find that books are going to vary in their usefulness. Some people find them really great. Other people find them really terrible. One that I found unexpectedly useful was a book called Process by an author called Sarah Stadola. And the reason that I liked that was that it was about the writing process of a whole range of different authors. Usually, most of them in fiction, but some of them in nonfiction. And the reason that I liked that was because it showed how just completely random the advice and process of these authors was. You know, they would just do completely different things. And that was kind of helpful because it shows that the thing that makes you a good writer is not necessarily like your specific quirks. What makes you a good writer, or yeah, I'll send all these in the chat, no problem at all. What makes a good writer is the interrogation of process and the commitment to self-improvement around that, right? You are going to improve your writing over time by reading well, and by figuring out what works, because what works for you is going to be probably quite specific, you know? And so if you go to an author that you like, and just say, okay, well, I can just copy what they do, you might find yourself following Dostoevsky and waking, you know, start writing at 11 p.m. and then write until 4 a.m. in the morning, drinking hot tea the entire time. And that worked for him. I don't know if it's possible for everybody. And so, you know, you want to find what works for you. So follow that, and think about your process and look at your best writing. Say, okay, well, what made that good? Why did that work for me?
Absolutely.
Right. So yeah, and I'll just post all these in the chat now.
Thank you, Will. Kathy, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think Ria has covered lots of resources within UNSW in general. So what I think this is more like to help students improving skills of writing. So what I would suggest is so especially what we do within our group again is we have a section that get all the students review other students' papers and read, or not proper review, but read other students' papers. So because they are working, although within the same group, but on different subjects, so your paper needs to make sense to others, but starting from your own group. So you can use that as a resource. So your peer within your group is a resource to you to improve the writing. And I also agree, like the marking is helpful, like if you're marking others. And in terms of us is so once you publish a paper in journal, so you become an expert in that specific area. So edit journals will send you papers for review. So don't fear that you are not capable. So if it's relevant, try to review the papers. That's actually an excellent way of learning how to write. So see how other people's writing the papers and reflect with yourselves and what would you going to write if you are doing this, you did this work. So that's another kind of soft resource that you can acquire. And the other things, what I did to learn how to write was to read papers, especially close work that you do. So for example, after you read the KM, after you understand what other people's did, so you trying to think of, oh, how I'm going to write, and after reading the methods, for example, how I'm going to write, and then see how this paper did in terms of writing. So that's a good way to compare, or after reading the introduction, so how I'm going to plan the experiments and how they plan the experiments. So that's the way you learn from them. You can even break up a paragraph that they wrote, the paper, it's written in the paper, and then see how these were wrote in other papers. So that's kind of ways you try to improve yourself in terms of writing.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I like that concept of, we are afraid of, and we think we'll never become good writers. But I think the concept that the word to describe what you just described is emulation, emulating the texts of those papers that you think are of a very high caliber. That's a great point. Kevin, also in relation to journals now, just slightly shifting gears, I'm going to combine a couple of questions just in the interest of time. It can be difficult. I mean, of course, our supervisors normally assist us in this venture, but finding the right journal to publish in is a difficult thing. So, how do you know? What are the ways to search or get the correct journal or relevant fields for article submission? And also, as a second embedded question, in relation to quantity over quality, not that many of us, I would assume, are at this point yet where we're just, overflowing with papers to publish, but is it more advantageous? I've always wanted to know this. Is it more advantageous to publish multiple times in journals with low impact factors or a few in high impact factors? So two-pronged question there.
Yeah. Okay, so about finding the papers, yes, you're starting from your supervisor's suggestions. They are the best people who knows this, are familiar with this area, and they will give you suggestions. And that's actually for the first few papers mostly. And later on, when you get to know more about this field, is you just look for the rankings of the papers. That's what I did before. So from the scopes, from SGR ranking, journal rankings. So find a specific area, and then see what do you think, and then you find some journals, and then you can go to the journal website to look at their scopes, and the papers they publish, whether they have published similar papers in your area. So that's a good criteria. And one of the things, because later on, as I said earlier, the first one or two papers, you follow supervisor suggestions. Later on, you want to decide. So the best guide is also to find the papers that you cite in your paper. Where do they publish these papers, in which journals? So that's really helpful. And actually, as an editor, I usually pick up reviewers from your reference list. So the papers that's the closest to your work, and I pick the reviewer from there. So yeah, so that's very a good starting point to see what papers you cite and where they publish the paper. So yeah,
Sure.
and that's the first question, I guess.
Yes.
But maybe just add a bit more. So you do have a lot of similar journals. They are on similar areas. So that depends, and that's your own, probably later when you get more familiar, your own judgment where to publish. And some journals are more practical, some journals are more fundamental science. So also think about, well, how do you want this paper to be read by more practical side of a person or more fundamental research audience. So also think about that, because as I said, you want this paper to get audience, and then think about from that area. And with regards to the quality or quantity, I think, to me at least, it's very clear. It's a quality. It's the most essential thing. And my supervisors always told me, don't try to break up papers into low-ranking journals. Try to make one. If you can make one really good, it's much better than a few low-impact papers. And so that's we'll always try to aim to publishing high-ranking journals. And these high-ranking journals are more like, it gets more trust and people tend to cite you and tend to learn from you. So because you want to get this work out. And as I said earlier, publishing a paper is just, it's probably the end of your work. I mean, for that particular work, but it's just the start of the paper. So you want this paper to reach the audience, and in good journal, in higher quality paper, we always attract more attention in the fields. And I mean, I'm not, sometimes there's one from my supervisor, I'm not sure I'm 100% agree, but she says, you have loads of shitty journal papers. That's actually, it reduces the quality of your CV. So if you try to publish a lot of bad, not bad, I mean, like less impactful papers, it's not really good practice. I mean, you don't have to agree, but I also don't agree that 100%. In fact, in our area, it's called the journal called Water Science and Technology. That impact factor is not really good, around between 1 to 2 or above 2 now. It's not a really high level journal, but it's quite practical, and lots of top professors also publish there, and they get lots of citations. So, but the work's more practical, so they won't be accepted by high level journals. So in these cases, when you think your work is highly impactful in the practical side or any other aspects, you could try to publish there, but don't try a lot in publishing lower ranking journals. That's my opinion, basically.
So invaluable. We're speaking about things that I think just we don't hear about. I personally feel very fulfilled by a very satisfying answer in relation to something I've wanted to know for years. So thank you. Will, do you have anything to add to this?
Yeah, just to agree that, like, you know, in terms of thinking about when you're publishing and your work in general, you always want to go for quality, just because like you have people who are editors, right? Like you're not just sending this out to an algorithm. When you're going for a job, which you're really considering these kind of questions is part of that consideration. You know, they're not just going to be looking at rankings. They're going to be looking at your work. They're going to be looking at how they know about your work, you know, what they know about you, you know, the quality of these things. And that's not necessarily just going to be defined by a ranking. And so always making sure that you have that integrity in your own work. You know, you don't want to just be putting stuff out there. And you never know, because like one of the greatest opportunities in my career was an exhibition that I ended up being part of, that was a product of a workshop that I did. So I was at a workshop, someone who wasn't from my field came along to a presentation that I gave at the workshop, and then they asked me if I would be interested, and then it ended up with me working on an exhibition at Harvard, right? And I had no idea that that would come from that. I thought only 10 people were going to turn up. And that there would be nothing from that, but because the work was something that I was proud of, it had that effect. And so always being proud of your work, sure that's the case. Like at the end of the day, that's really going to you know, have that ongoing you know, that weight to it, more than, you know, the kind of whatever ranking or you know, like how whatever volume you achieve in your publications.
Absolutely. No, thank you for that addition. No, totally. Pride of work does lead to things. My leading publication, my first ever publication that I was lead author in, I just put it everywhere. I just submitted it everywhere, and I got a few responses back, and it was the best feeling. And you know, it did lead to opportunities. So I know exactly what you mean. We've got only a few minutes remaining. I'm going to just finish up with one question for each of you, please. And if you can just make it like we'll have a bursting 2-minute statement response. Well, you've marked over 1,400 essays to produce the essay writing guide, which you have, which we've gratefully received in the chat box. What are the 3 top takeaway points from this guide?
I've marked way more than 1,400 essays. That was just in that space of like 4 years.
I see. How many is it now?
Oh God knows, God knows. I only did that.
Oh, gosh.
Anyway, I don't know if that's impressive to people or not, but it just certainly feels like my brain's
Totally
broken.
is.
Writing is thinking. So if in doubt, always go back to that. You know, think about it as a process, an ongoing process. You always want to be writing. You always want to be interacting with your writing, because good writing is good thinking. That's why it's so hard, to quote somebody else. Your workspace is your headspace. So, you know, think about, you know, writing is hard. Research is hard. So if you can, and it's increasingly hard during lockdown to do this, if you can make your workspace work for you, be it, you know, your external resources, whatever they are, use those and change those to suit yourself, and edit your work, and learn to edit as much as you can, and don't feel like pushed to use particular technology if it doesn't work for you. So you figure out what works for you and go with that. So ongoing interrogation of process is the whole point. But you can read it; it'll take you like 2 minutes to read. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Your response was in 1 minute. It was too efficient. Thank you, Will, for that. That's extremely practical and useful. Keithing, in relation to, I mean, as we round out, do you have any final thoughts, sentiments in relation to academic writing? What do you want us, as you know, mostly PhD candidates or, you know, postgraduate students to know about the concept and the field of academic writing? And also, we'd like to hear a little bit more about your work with the Discovery Early Career Researcher Award, DECRA. So if you can speak to those 2 pieces, that would be much appreciated.
Yeah, so I mean, with regards to DECRA, I think your track record is most important. So when they assess DECRA, there are 4 criteria. One is the investigator or capability of the candidate, which accounts for 50% of the score. So half of the score is about the candidate. And then project quality and innovation, it's another 25%. And the benefits, you have to show that the work is beneficial to the country or to the research and to the environment. So that's another criteria. The last criteria is a feasibility. So you have to make sure that it's feasible work, and it's a value for money because they are going to fund you. And in terms of because the candidate is more important, so I just want to add a bit more. So PhD graduates, I mean, they get DECRA from year 1 to 5. So that's about eligibility. So you can apply for DECRA within 5 years of your graduation, not considering any career interruptions. But if you have career interruptions, you can have more time. So it depends. So if you are excellent PhD graduates and publish really high level journals papers, and you don't have to have a lot of papers, and mostly first authors from your PhDs. So you anywhere ranking from maybe 5 to 15 papers. I think research office may have a status of what the average publications every that the DECRA candidate has have. And building to that is if you are more like after 3 or 4 years, not try to focus on your own first author writings, but also try to have co-authors and especially senior authors, like you are actually led the work and you have the thoughts at the beginning. So by supervising students and also some grants experience, that's really important to build up your track record. So not just the number of publications, but also a variety of research skills.
Sure, thank you so much. I've just noticed we've had 3 questions come through in the last 2 minutes. We've got 2 minutes left. Let's do a speed round. 30 seconds. We want to get to these questions. Will, in 30 seconds, can you please tell us, give us the answer to, could you please tell us something about the journal metrics like rank, impact factor, site score, SNIP? The challenge of the hour.
I'm not the one to ask about this, I think.
Okay, Kevin, sure. Kevin, are you able to speak to this the question from, it's only a Z number that was provided, but it's in relation to anything about journal metrics, including rank, impact factor, site score. I'll construct a question out of that. What is most important? Rank, impact factor, site score, or SNIP?
I guess different people may have different opinions, but to me, ranking is more important in that area. So we always aim for at least Q1 or top 10, top 5, like that. And some really good journals, for example, in our area, Journal of Hydrology, it doesn't have big impact factor, but it's really high reputation, and its rankings are also high. So because it's in different fields, different, and in chemical engineering is also different from civil engineering. So it's based on discipline, I guess. Yeah.
Sure, thank you. And Will, the 2 final questions, if I can ask for 30-second responses. If journals in a particular field of research is limited, should we repeat publishing in those journals considering relevance or field, or can we go for another journal covering greater field?
Yeah, so usually the suggestion is try to publish your papers in especially similar topics in different journals, so it gets a wider audience, and that's actually the strategy that we're doing. So we always go for different journals for same topics.
Fantastic, thank you. And Will, in relation to how to take any comments on how to take notes or ideas from research reading, I should say.
It's going to vary by discipline, because what that looks like is going to vary pretty widely. But I would say things that produce malleable information, so things that you can transfer across easily into your writing process. So, but also things that you like to use and enjoy. I found that I tried to use particular digital means, and then I ended up going back to writing because it was what I enjoyed, and it made the work easier. So I ended up going very old school with it, but again, comes back to that interrogation of process. But whatever you do, make sure that it's producing things that you can use. If you're reading stuff or you're doing things and you're not producing something from that, then you might as well not do it. Anything that relies on your memory is a waste of time.
Wonderful. That was fantastic. Thank you both for keeping up with the fast-paced conclusion of our discussion time. That was the final question. Many thanks to you both on behalf of the PGC. Thank you. I'm going to now promptly hand us over to Shuang to close us out for the event. Thank you so much, Shuang.
Thank you, Josh, Will, and Kefeng for leading such an amazing discussion on how to write an academic paper today. So as a PhD candidate, writing an academic paper is a basic requirement for me. I personally learned a lot from our discussion today. So writing is thinking. We should try to present our research in an accurate and precise way. Yeah, thanks. So again, we are Postgraduate Council aiming at represents, supports all our postgraduate students in UNSW. If you have any questions or concerns, please do reach out to us. And please follow our Facebook, Instagram page, and pay attention to our following events. Thanks again for all your presenting today. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
everyone. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.
And thank you again to our speakers. Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.